Hey guys, it's Dalton back with the War for Your Mind. I hope you guys like the visual. I don't really see a point of you watching me talk to you, so change the tab, look away from the computer, do your own thing, do whatever you gotta do. Just like for you guys to hear me out on this one. My last vlog was a bit more general of a discussion, but for this one I'd like to be a little bit more specific so you guys can really, actually talk about some issues here. Today I'd like to talk to you about Rick Scott. For those of you who don't know who Rick Scott is, he is the former CEO of Columbia HCA and the current governor of Florida. But before I go any further on Rick Scott, let me tell you a little about Columbia HCA. Founded in 1987 as Columbia Hospital Corporation, they eventually merged with HCA 2 years later, in hoping of expanding their corporation. Within 10 years, Columbia HCA went from owning 4 hospitals to almost 400, and they were known to be one of the largest private for-profit healthcare companies in the country, though today talks about how great competition is for people. In 1997, Scott left Columbia HCA in the middle of an investigation that would later report the company admitting to 14 felonies, resulting in the fine of $1.7 billion, one of the largest fines in United States history. What were the fines for? Billing Medicaid, Medicare, and TRICARE for lab tests that weren't even ordered by their doctors, billing the government for healthcare visits that were not needed by the people, and attaching false diagnostics to patients' records, and claiming their advertisement costs as educational costs to increase their hospital's reimbursements. Now I know Medicare's policy is changing a lot. However, I don't see any of these changes that would justify such actions by the company. How are you the CEO of this company, yet you allegedly had no knowledge of any of these things going on? Furthermore, in the unlikely case that you didn't know about any of these things going on, how do you honestly expect to flaunt your leadership skills when you let a $1.7 billion mistake go unnoticed? At this point, one must ask, how does a man like this end up being the governor of Florida? Well, let's go back to the election. Did you know that he spent over $70 million of his own money for his campaign of education and job creation compared to the less than $30 million spent by the Democratic Party? Did you know that even with these outrageous numbers, he still only won by less than 1.5% of the vote? It's always nice to know that your governor bought his way in the office. Since his election, his budget proposals and business ideas have had little to do with his $70 million campaign promises. One of his first and more famous decisions was his rejection of the Obama $2.4 million offer to install high-speed trains that would connect Tampa and Orlando. Would this not create jobs for construction workers, engineers, and technicians, in addition to all the workers that it would take to maintain the train system? Rhode Island senators said that they wanted money from the money that was intended for Florida to be sent to their state, claiming that it would better their transportational systems and create jobs. He's also cutting the funding for the Agency of Persons with Disability with an emergency order. This 15% cut will directly affect those with Down syndrome, autism, cerebral palsy, and other handicaps. But who cares about those people? They don't vote. And besides, now they can be part of your Medicare program. He's also used an executive order to force drug tests on state employees, despite the fact that this very issue was ruled unconstitutional by federal courts in Florida in 2004. Howard Simon from ACLU said that the state of Florida cannot force people to surrender their constitutional rights in order to work for the state. And on top of the state employees, he's currently attempting to push drug tests on people who have taxpayers' assistance, also known as people on welfare. Do you know anyone on welfare who honestly doesn't smoke a little bit of weed? In just 4 months, Rick Scott has managed to be labeled one of the worst governors in the nation. Scott has said before, and I quote, "We're going to run this state like a business." Perhaps this is his justification on cutting the funding to support the disabled and the unprofitable. Scott isn't a fan of education either. He planned on cutting 10% of education so that he could cut down 5% of corporate taxing and put golf courses in state parks with the Jack Nicklaus bill. The Nicklaus bill was introduced to legislators shortly after he came into office and met with Jack Nicklaus, proposing that Nicklaus would build golf courses in 5 of the Florida state parks. He also wants to steal away $2,300 from teachers' annual salaries so that he can cut down $1.5 billion in corporate income taxes. He argues that he will also cut down property taxes with this move, though we will only be saving a whopping $45 a year, and that's if you own a homestead exemption. Though none of this really bothers me. The rich and wealthy will always benefit the rich and wealthy. Wealthy white tourists will always love golf, and Florida's education system has always sucked. The one thing that truly upsets me, not only as a Floridian, but as an American citizen, is Scott's relationship with Solantic and Florida's healthcare regulations. Scott co-founded Solantic in 2001, a few years after he left as an alleged criminal from Columbia HCA. His shares worth in Solantic are a whopping $62 million of his $218 million net worth, almost a third of his wealth and enough shares to control the company. A few days before he came into office, he gave his shares to his wife. Did you know that Florida is one of the only states in the country where the governor's spouse has no conflict of interest in their policies? Scott, as a governor, appoints the heads of the agencies for healthcare administration and the Department of Health, programs that would license, investigate, and inspect companies such as Solantic, though he claims to have no legal relationship to Solantic, and that there are no conflict of interest at hand that we should be worried about. However, Scott plans on privatizing Medicaid by placing a reform bill that would give health maintenance organizations control over the government programs, which will directly benefit companies like Solantic. He also supports policies to shrink down public healthcare clinics, leaving patients to venture elsewhere for their healthcare needs. Under these new proposed laws, Solantic's potential client base will drastically increase. To be absolutely clear on my position, Rick Scott continues to take money from the poor and the disabled while giving it to the corporates and his own legislator. He claims to have no relationship to Solantic, whose services are physicals, vaccinations, and drug testing, though at the same time he's encouraging policies to close down public clinics who give out cheap vaccinations, physicals, and he's using executive orders that will force drug testing on state officials and soon-to-be welfare applicants. Anyways, thank you guys for listening. It's been great talking to you guys. Love for some feedback. Subscribe if you really want to. This is Dalton with A War for Your Mind.